Shalom Rav al Yisrael al Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael al Tasim Le'olam. Ki atahu melech Adon b'chol hashalom. Ki atahu melech Adon b'chol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. V'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Thank you, sweetie.
All right. So today we are starting Mishpatim.
So Ed, I have a question for you. If that is the case, then where don't we have free will?
No, we don't have free will. Ask Lot's wife.
That is a deep question. That's a deep question.
She
Do we
turned
have-
around. Yeah, she said, turn around, Lot's wife. She turned around. She turned into a pillar of salt. She had free will. Now she's
But that
in a
was her
shaker.
free will to turn.
Yeah, she turned around.
Yes, but
Couldn't hold it.
Yes, but remember, Ed, that she was told not to look back.
She had free will.
She was tempted.
She was tempted.
She was tempted. Dr. Ed, do you want to start us off tonight on 21:1? We're going to talk about slavery.
These are the rules that you shall set before them. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, that person shall serve 6 years and shall go free in the 7th year without payment. If came single, he shall leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. If his master gave him a wife and she has borne him children, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. But if the slave declares, I love you, my master, and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free, his master shall take him before God. He shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall then remain his master's slave for life. When a person sells a daughter as a slave, she shall not go free as other slaves do. If she proves, if she proves to be displeasing to her male master, who designated her for himself, he misled her to be redeemed. He shall not have the right to sell her to outsiders, since he broke faith with her. And if the master designated her for a son, he shall deal with her, as is the practice with free maidens. If he marries another, he must not withhold from this one her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights.
All right. Any thoughts here? This is kind of tricky stuff.
These people were slaves, and yet they themselves come out of slavery and then have slaves. They seem to deal a bit kindly with them. They have rules, but still in all, it's a conundrum to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike, you know, what has always bothered me is that we kept slaves, even though we got out of Egypt because we were slaves.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but it was a different type of slavery. Wait a minute. When they're talking about, you see, I look at this completely different. Of course, I have a different head anyways, but I look at this as that when they use the word slave, it's not what we think of as slave. I think of it more as a servant. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think of it as a slave like somebody who doesn't have free
Okay, but
choice.
Ruthie, in your mind, what is the difference between a slave and a servant?
Okay, a slave doesn't have any choices. Like they're forced under their master. Okay, but in this case, they were saying that they even talked about free maidens. What is a free maiden? I'd like to know what that's all about. You see, there's a lot that's said here that there's so many things in between the lines. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because I don't. Go ahead.
I agree with what you're saying, because I think they had a very different economic system. We're
That's
talking
right.
about a very vastly different economic system than what we have today. And of course, our slavery, what we can think of is the last time that there were actual slaves were African Americans that were torn. I mean, they did not go by these rules.
No, and they tortured them for
Yeah.
just willy-nilly, you know.
And they took families apart. They took babes
Right.
out of mothers' arms. It was really awful.
Yeah.
It was, and
Terrible.
so this was.
That's why I say it's not like a slave.
Right, because there's all
Yeah.
different kinds of slavery, and I think. But
Mike,
anybody else?
Mike, I think that we have said this before, but most of the slaves, for the majority of the time of history, most of the slaves came as a result of a country losing a war, and then the winners took slaves.
Mm-hmm. Right, along with treasure, along with
treasure, and
But not in this case. But not in this case. This wasn't about war.
Well, but Ruthie, let me ask you: were those slaves paid?
Were those slaves what?
Paid a salary?
You don't know.
The slaves that we're talking about now,
Yeah.
that you say that you know, maybe the better word is servant. Were
Yeah.
they being paid? Because you know, to me, the difference between a slave and a servant back in those days. So we're talking about back in those days.
Well, maybe they were paid not like money wise, but maybe in other ways they were given things. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, they were given food and they were given lodging,
Yeah.
but no money. So you know, they couldn't go out and buy something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also has to tie in with debts too. I think a person becomes a slave, and this is kind of talked about overall in the book of Proverbs. Anyone who has a debt to another person shall become their slave. I mean, this is kind of
you pay your debt with labor.
With labor, something like what Jacob did with Laban.
Exactly.
And so,
Plus,
anybody
you're
else?
supposed to.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, also, but like, you know, in the Torah, it tells you also, like, after, like, when you get to when we talk about the Shemitah,
Yes.
like when the slaves are released, you're supposed to release them, and you're supposed to give them sustenance. Like, you're not supposed to just send them off.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with Ruth. I agree with Ruthie. It's different.
It is much.
It's not
different.
like you just own. It's not like slavery, like in this country, was like, you know, owning people like you'd own animals or something.
That's right.
Right.
It's
This
very
like more,
different.
Yeah, there's certain standards, like there's certain, almost like certain protections for the servant. You know.
Also, if you read this top line, it says, "If it fails her in these three ways, she shall go free without payment." So there was payment of some sort. I don't know what this was in relationship to. See what it says at the top line?
Okay, the way that I read it is that if you have a woman who is a slave
Yeah.
to you, but for some reason she fails you, she can go free without you getting payment.
Oh, I see.
So let me ask the hard question. You know, we talk about a living Bible. We talk about this is antiquated old stuff. what's the explanation here that you can spin a positive with? You know, I don't see anything here. I mean, you know, if he gave you a wife and then he had a child, then it belongs to the taskmaster. And what's the reason that we're looking at this and saying this is beautiful? I don't think it's beautiful.
I don't either. I agree with you.
I don't think we're saying it's beautiful. I think we're saying it's not as bad as certain things, but also, yeah, I don't know if it's beautiful. It's a little bit more compassionate. It's definitely more compassionate than what we've known of modern slavery that ended in 1865. And I mean, some even might even say some of us are still enslaved because of the way our debt system works. So I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at it.
So let me take them. Let's say we didn't have slavery in 1865, with no comparison. This still isn't beautiful.
I mean, yeah, I agree, because you have female slaves that might become somebody's wife, right, with their son. There's like a lot of things a lot of decisions being made without, who's to say, you know, they don't have any rights to the decisions that are made upon their lives, right? So, I mean, I don't think I heard many people thinking this was great. I mean,
the thing is,
it's interesting. Remember what it said? I forgot what line it was. It says, but what if the slave loves her master and doesn't want to be free? I think that's interesting. That means, yeah, but if the slave declares, I love my master and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free, that gives me the impression that she's having a pretty good life.
And that's
that's the man that has the choice. That's not the woman.
Yeah.
I agree. We're not talking about, we all know that this is sexism. I know that already. Yeah. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from that this woman feels that she loves her master and her children, and this doesn't want to, it's like she does have some free choice. That's what I'm getting at.
But I'm saying that that's not the woman that's talking about. That particular passage is talking about the male slave and his wife and their kids. It's not the female in that particular. The female still doesn't have a choice, and I understand why. I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying that particular passage in my reading is talking about a male slave.
Oh, I see.
And his wife.
Yeah, I just read it over again. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I thought it was the female slave. You're right. I apologize. I forgot. I saw that. Right.
Okay. So what about this? All right. Let's think of really not very nice things that happen in our society, right? Homelessness. We have homelessness all around us. Did homelessness occur in a situation like this? Is this a situation where the slave thinks to themselves, if I go out, will I be able to provide for my wife and my children? And then even on the female side, I'm just asking questions. I don't know. Just asking questions. On the female side, if the female is not a slave and is let go free, will she say, am I going to be able to make it if I leave this situation? At least I have a family, right? I have people that care about me. I have food on the table. I'm just throwing this out there for thoughts.
Security versus freedom, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know what the answer is. I know that, society is always changing. We're always hopefully evolving, and it's always good to look at certain things. Does anyone want to continue reading? Ruthie?
I will. Where are we starting from?
11?
11, okay. If he fails her in these 3 ways, she shall go free without payment. One who fatally strikes another person shall be put to death. If a meal killer did not do it by design, but it came about by an act of God, I will assign you a place to which he can flee. Now that's interesting. What is an act of God if a male kills somebody? I don't understand that.
All right.
If did not do it by design, but it came by an act of God, I will assign you a place to which he can flee. What would be
It's like
an example?
manslaughter versus murder. You know?
I have an idea. See what you guys think of it.
Okay.
Let's say that you are a house builder,
Okay.
and as you're building a wall, the wall falls on top of the master.
Uh-huh.
Well, you killed the person, but that was an act of God. You did not do it. How does
I
that
see.
sound?
Mm-hmm.
I see. That's what you would call an act of God. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If it's
Okay.
unintentional, if it's not a
No, it's
premeditated
unintentional.
murder.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
intentional. Okay. All right, we'll go on. When a person schemes against another and kills through treachery, you shall take that person from my very altar to be put to death. The person schemes against another. Okay. One who strikes one's father or mother shall be put to death. One who kidnaps a person, whether having sold or still holding the victim, shall be put to death. One who insults one's father or mother shall be put to death. Insult? Well, whoa, just insults them? Oh boy, that means every teenager's in big trouble.
Yes, I know it. All the kids would be.
We'd have no kids left, and I wouldn't be here.
I won't tell you how many times I've been insulted by my kids. Okay. All right. When two parties quarrel and one strikes the, bring it up, strikes the, wait a minute. One quarrel and strikes the other with stone or fist, and the victim does not die but has to take to bed. When two parties quarrel and one strikes the other with stone or fist, and the victim does not die but has to take to bed. If that victim then gets up and walks outdoors upon a staff, the assailant shall go unpunished except for paying for the idleness and the cure. Huh. Oh well, I'm not exactly understanding that all.
Paying the
When a
doctor
person-
bills.
What'd you say?
The doctors.
Paying the doctor bills.
Oh, you gotta pay for the doctor bill. Okay. When
I
a
know that's
person
in
who
the
is a
cure. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. When a person who is a slave owner strikes a slave, male or female, with a rod who dies, there and then it must be avenged.
Okay,
But
hold on. Okay, hold on for just 1 second. If we look
Yeah.
at the bottom of 1217 on the capital offenses, death is the punishment for kill unless it is done unintentionally. So unintentionally was an act of God.
I see. I got it. Okay. But going back to 20 before we go on, when a person who is a slave owner strikes a slave, male or female, with a rod who dies there, and then it must be avenged. What do they mean by that?
That the person who did it must be killed.
Oh, killed. He
Immediately.
didn't say killed. Okay, that's
Yeah,
why I was.
it's right there. Yeah,
Oh, right then. Okay. Okay.
without a trial.
All right. Oh, where am I? Where am I? When a
Yeah.
person. Okay.
But if the
Okay.
victim-
Avenged. Okay. But if the victim, okay, survives a day or two, it is not to be avenged since the one is the other's property. What? Survives a day. So if the person survives it a day or two, it is not to be avenged since the one is the other's. So because he's the slave of the master? That's bizarre.
Yeah.
So he's still going to die, but instead of dying that day, he dies a couple of days later.
Yeah, that's a tough
weird
one. That's a weird
That's
one.
really weird. That drives me nuts, to be honest. Okay.
Old time
Let's go-
justice.
Okay, when two or more parties fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according as the woman's husband may exact the payment to be based on reckoning. Well, that's terrible. If they created the miscarriage, I think that's pretty bad. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise.
Okay, if we can hold on here for a second. This is a very, very quoted part of the Bible. An eye for an eye, tooth for
Yeah.
a tooth. Okay,
It's always been misconstrued, I know.
right. So I have 2 points that I want to make, and then I'd like to hear your opinion. Point number 1. If it says no more than an eye for an eye, no more than a tooth for a tooth, it means that the punishment should fit the crime.
Right.
Okay, that's point number one. Or point number two,
So this is a precedent setting. This is a
Right.
precedent setting type of passage here. That's
right?
pretty
So
good.
that,
I like it.
you know, if you do something wrong, whatever punishment you're going to have has to be based on the damages that you have incurred. So if you steal a loaf of bread because you are hungry, doesn't mean that you can be put to death,
Mm.
right? So if we were to do it,
I'm getting a legal opinion now. Alba, what do you think? Yes,
I agree
she
with
she
that.
says yes. Alba the lawyer says yes.
Okay, good.
then I'm going to stop there while I'm ahead.
No, go for it. Keep going. What were you saying? Go.
Okay, the other way to interpret this thing, and I'm getting this thing from the Talmud, this is why I was asking you guys.
Okay.
The Talmud says it's not really an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth.
Right.
What it says is that they are assigning a monetary value
Right.
to whatever you have done.
Right.
Ah,
So how, okay, so let's say I poked out your eye, okay, by accident, okay? What would be the monetary value of that?
Okay, well, I'm going to give you an actual example. You know, since I was a business owner, we had an accident, and one of my workers lost 2 fingers.
Oh,
Well, the lawyer representing the person that this thing happened, it was an accident. The guy did it himself. He said that, you know, he went to a insurance company, and the insurance company says 2 fingers from the right hand would be this amount of money, or 2 fingers from the left hand would be that amount. So they are already assigning a monetary value
oh,
to limbs and property.
Wow.
oh, okay,
I actually went through that.
okay.
And this is where
So
we
I
get that.
gather, so any lawyer could tell me what an eye is worth, you know, okay, I'm just curious.
Can we ask our lawyer what an eye is worth?
What's an eye worth?
It depends on what the profession is. So
Oh, it
there's
depends on the
some-
profession. So if
It
you
goes-
need your
it
eyes for
goes-
your profession,
It goes to lots of wages,
loss of wages. It goes to loss of wages, loss of income.
right?
Wow.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay, all right.
Well,
okay.
I learned something tonight.
See?
Yeah,
In fact, if you look at any, you can ask our lawyer, but if you look at any disability policy, it has it all written right out.
Right, workers' compensation has it all written out.
Written all
okay.
right out, you know.
When a person who is a slave owner strikes the eye of a slave male or female and destroys it, that person shall let the slave go free on account of the eye. If the owner knocks out the tooth of a slave, male or female, that person shall let the slave go free on account of the tooth.
can I
When
ask
an
a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't you think that that's kind of a punishment? Like to let the slave go free? Like if we're saying that most of the slaves are being taken care of by their masters,
Yeah,
you know, they're being treated well. If a person without an eye is set free to go out into the world with that disability, will they be able to do anything? If a person maybe with a tooth, it wouldn't be as much of a punishment, but like it's kind of like if you had a broken arm and you were or any of these things that if they become a disability, it's almost cruel for the master to set that person free because they have nobody to take care of them or sustain them out in the world.
so does it say that they have to go, or that the person, that the slave? Owner-
Shall means will.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but I don't know if I don't know if I'm necessarily saying, if I could kind of clarify my earlier statements. I think what I'm thinking of is more of a system where there's good points to choose to be a slave, and there's not so great points in that there's a spectrum, right? We talk about spectrums now in our society and within ourselves as people, and I believe that if we look upon this as kind of a spectrum type of thing, like that for some people it might be great. For other people, they can't wait to get away from the slavery. They need to, you know, be free. So I think we should try to hold two of those ideas at the same time, because for this person, that person might be like, finally, even if I don't have an eye, I can get away from this get out of this slavery situation. So I don't know.
I don't know, because I think I agree with Annie. I wouldn't want to have to be, I don't want to be thrown out because of the tooth. I don't want to be thrown out because of the eye. I would want to, you know, have the choice. It doesn't seem like there is a choice, you know, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you know, to be honest, I've never, I shouldn't say this, but I still don't take this as you know, as divine, a divine thing. So that's why I don't get too upset about it. All right, we'll continue reading on. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. The ox, I have nothing. See, this gets me upset because, you know, the ox didn't, he might have been, you know, provoked or something, shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox is not to be punished. So the ox is stoned and the flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox is not to be punished. Okay. If, however, that ox had been in the habit of goring and its owner, though warned, has failed to guard it and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned and its owner too shall be put to death. Okay, so, I see. If this is a habitual thing that his ox keeps on goring people, then he's going to be put to.
Let me make a comment.
Okay.
When I went to medical school, when I went to law school,
yeah,
and we were talking about, you know, what happens if a dog bites a person. The judge says, is this the first time or has the dog done it many times?
Right.
And the joke was, and this is what the professor said, is that every dog is entitled to one bite.
Very interesting.
But if you do it twice, then already there's a problem.
Yeah, but what they're saying is if this owner allows this ox to constantly gore people, then he's being not responsible with his ox. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so where am I now? When am I at 28?
I think you're at 20. You're at 30.
30.
30. If ransom is imposed, the owner must pay whatever is imposed to redeem the owner's own life. So too, if it gores a minor male or female, its owner shall be dealt with according to the same rule. But if the ox gores a slave, male or female, its owner shall pay 30 shekels of silver to the master, and the ox shall be stoned. So isn't that interesting? So the slave is really a subhuman person, and that's what they're saying right here. That's where they're saying that this is not an equal person, and that bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's like a slave again. So that's where it isn't a servant. That's where it's a slave, because the slave is having different, fairness. So when a person opens a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or an ass falls into it, the one responsible for the pit must make restitution, paying the price to the owner, but keeping the dead animal. What are you going to keep the dead animal for? I don't get this. This is getting crazy to me. I'm telling you, I'm going nuts over this.
You know, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There were no laws. You got to understand, there were no laws. This was there was no civil law at this point in time, and this is the first stab at a civilized group of people trying to make sense out of civil law, using the word civil twice. Civil law. There was nothing. We think of this as, an eye for an eye, an ox falls in his face and maims the slave of whatever. But this was the first try. This was the first attempt for civil lawsuit, which just didn't exist. Your ox fell on top of your wife. You shot the ox and you shot everybody else in the ox owner's family. This is the first time that this is really civilization, and you got to put that in perspective.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think I kind of go with Dr. Ed on that too, because I remember my feeling when I first read the Bible, and it was always like this feeling of, wow, they put everything in here. They put laws in here. They put health care in here. It's almost like the Bible was like a whole range of encyclopedia stuff even in the
Handbook of
Torah.
civilization.
Right, and it's hard to look at it in our eyes, thinking about how civilization has changed throughout the years. So yeah,
Remember, the Gutenberg press was only invented in the 1600s?
1400.
1400s.
14, the Gutenberg press. Unless someone sat down and wrote this stuff out, it just didn't exist. So you have a document which everybody in the Israelite nation reads. There's uniformity here. It's the only book, and it spells out civil law. That's it. And they all understand it because there's only one book.
Okay.
excellent.
I think a lot of the laws and things like that, like we have trust documents at our church that are, were written in like the 1800s or something like that about care of horses and things like that. You can use the funds for care of horses. So it's like the document itself, the original document, you have to try and figure out the intent of it and update it. So like now it could be about a car or about a bicycle or about something like that you could use to update that rule. So I think like a lot of these rules, if you think about what the intent was, you might be able to sit a little bit easier with what these old rules are, if you think about like the overall meaning that it's trying to give you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay, and Mike, I'd like to make a comment. I think that we should listen to what Ed is saying. Ed has said it a couple of times already. These are civil problems and civil laws. Now, does everybody know the difference between civil and criminal?
Well, civil doesn't, you don't go to jail. Criminal.
Is criminal
is
with
more
intent?
fine.
Criminal.
Is criminal with intent?
Oh, no. It's got nothing to do with this intent. It could be intent on both. The difference is this. Civil laws are wrongs or are meant to amend wrongs between persons and persons.
Right.
Criminal law is between a person and the state.
Yep.
Oh.
Michael, could we ask our lawyer?
Yes, it's right.
When a person's ox injures a neighbor's ox and it dies, they shall sell the live ox and divide its price. They shall also divide the dead animal. If, however, it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring and its owner has failed to guard it, that person must restore ox for ox, but shall keep the dead animal. When a person steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, that person shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. That sounds more logical to me. If the thief is seized while tunneling and beaten to death, there is no blood guilt in that case. If the thief is seized while tunneling and beaten to death, there is no blood guilt in that case. I don't understand that, but somebody can explain that to me. But anyways, if the sun had already risen, there is blood guilt in that case. The thief must make restitution, and if lacking the means, shall be sold for the theft. But if what was stolen, whether ox or ass or sheep, is found alive and in hand, that person shall pay double.
Maybe we go down to the commentary for some of what you're looking for.
All right.
Let me see. Tunneling. While tunneling under a wall. Oh, so
for the purpose of housebreaking. So it's actually like a criminal offense. Yeah.
So breaking into breaking down
like breaking and entering. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Sure. When a person who owns livestock lets it loose to graze in another's land, and so allows a field or a vineyard to be grazed bare, restitution must be made for the impairment of that field or vineyard. When a fire is started and spreads to thorns so that stacked, standing, or growing grain is consumed, the one who started the fire must make restitution. When a person gives money or goods to another for safekeeping, and they are stolen from that other person's house, if caught, the thief shall pay double. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house shall depose before God and deny laying hands on the other's property. In all charges of misappropriation pertaining to an ox, an ass, a sheep, a garment, or any other loss.
Can I say something here? Okay, I'm glad Dr. Mike is still with us. Shall depose before God. Does that remind you of anything? Is that putting your hand on the Bible and saying, "I do solemnly swear," or my right hand?
Oh,
That's exactly right. You're taking an oath.
Wow.
That actually is where it comes from in the law.
True.
That's what so they were doing it before, and we continue doing it.
That's amazing. Wow.
So that particular way of doing things, Mike, is 3,000 years old.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Go ahead, Cynthia. Yeah, I think we're at 8, right? Yeah.
Yes. In all charges of misappropriation pertaining to an ox, an ass, a sheep, a garment, or any other loss whereof one party alleges this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God declares guilty shall pay double to the other.
Oh, okay, so I have a question
God
here because when I read it before, okay, the one whom God declares guilty shall pay double. Since when have we heard God declare anybody guilty?
I don't remember.
I don't know.
I'm going to go down to the commentary before God, suggesting that an oath was taken in such a case. An oath before the Eternal shall decide. The sacredness of the oath was emphasized by using the name of the Yud Ke Vav Ke.
Is this before or after Jethro tells Moses to make the judging system and all that?
Oh, this is after.
Yeah, this is after.
Oh, this is way after. Well,
so do those people speak for God?
If you remember what Jethro was saying to Moses, but Jethro was watching Moses spend all day long listening to cases, passing judgment on things, holding court. What Jethro was saying to Moses is that, you can't do this. You have to delegate this responsibility to other people. That's what Jethro was saying to him.
But Moses got to speak for God, right? So do these other people speak for God? Is that what it says? If they come before the magistrate, then that's God's decision.
Yeah, but how do you know?
Well, we don't. I don't know if we do.
How do you know? Okay, suppose you go to court, whether you're the plaintiff or the defendant, either one of the two, the judge makes a decision. Was that judge's decision or was that God's decision? Okay, my answer to this thing in here is that God should not be involved in this thing. In other words, we set up rules and regulations. We follow those rules and regulations, but those are human type things as opposed to divine judgment. I think that when it comes to the law and administering the law, we're talking about people's making decisions, not God.
So what does this, wait a minute, so what is this sentence? The case of both parties shall come before God.
Well, but this is what I was saying. It says, to whom God declares guilty. Well, God doesn't declare anybody guilty. The judge declares
God here.
Cynthia, go ahead, Cynthia.
To read, or did you want my...
No, just what you were saying. I'm sorry.
What was your comment?
Who is acting as God?
Right. Who is acting as God? Right. Yeah. Who does? Who acts for God here? It's hard to say because there's not any commentary about it. So we would probably, I don't know, we would assume something somebody
Oh,
was.
wait a minute, before God, suggesting that an oath was to be taken in such a case, the rest of the verse is difficult. Oh, I don't know. What
So
that
it's
means.
difficult. Even the rabbis say it's difficult. So
Yeah.
we're in fine territory. It's okay. It's difficult. But I think the other thing is like we have now trial by jury, right? So the jury has to decide guilt by any reasonable reasonable doubt, the reasonable
Yeah.
doubt clause. So
Beyond reasonable
so
doubt.
if they
Yeah.
can't decide, if there's not enough evidence, the person goes free, and then
Right.
so that's how things have evolved, and I think
Well, you can have 100.
It wasn't like that in Perry Mason's days, though. He always won his case.
got
There
it.
was no-
Columbo Columbo nailed
no,
it.
but no, Perry Mason more because he was a lawyer, you know. So yeah.
That's true. Cynthia, would you want to continue?
When a person gives to another an ass, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to guard, and it's injured, carried off with no witness about, an oath before the Eternal shall decide between the two of them that the one has not laid hands on the property of the other. The owner must acquiesce, and no restitution shall be made. But if the animal was stolen from the guardian, restitution shall be made its owner. If it was torn by beasts, the guardian shall bring it as evidence, not needing to replace what has been torn by beasts. When a person borrows an animal from another and it dies or is injured, its owner, not being with it, that person must make restitution.
So is anyone thinking of shepherds here? Because I'm thinking like, yeah, this would probably, I mean, these people were always using, animal husbandry, all that kind of thing. Okay. Whoa, Dr. Ed, what have you got behind you?
That's the Rosetta Stone.
Oh my goodness.
Where is? Oh wow.
I can tell you a story about the Rosetta Stone if you'd like sometime.
All right. After this Parsha.
I almost got arrested because of the Rosetta Stone.
I can't wait to hear it. That's great. All right, Cynthia, you want to continue?
If a man seduces a virgin for whom the bride price has not been paid and lies with her, he must make her his wife by payment of a bride price. If her father refuses to give her to him, he must still weigh out silver in accordance with the bride price for virgins. You shall not tolerate a sorceress. Whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death. This is getting X-rated. Whoever sacrifices to a god other than the Eternal shall be proscribed. You shall not wrong nor oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You, communal leaders, shall not ill-treat any widow or orphan. If you do mistreat them, I will heed their outcry as soon as they cry out to me. And my anger shall blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword, and your own wives shall become widows, and your children orphans. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, do not act toward them as a creditor. Exact no interest from them. If you take your neighbor's garment in pledge, you must return it before the sun sets. Okay, it is the only available clothing. It is what covers the skin. In what else shall your neighbor sleep? Therefore, if that person cries out to me, I will pay heed, for I am compassionate. You shall not revile God, nor put a curse upon a chieftain among your people. You shall not put off the skimming of the first yield of your vats. You shall give me the male firstborn among your children. You shall do the same with your cattle and your flocks. 7 days it shall remain with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. Me meaning who? I'm confused. Me meaning God?
Yeah, I believe so, because it does seem like the narrator has shifted a little bit, right? It seems to have been Moses at first, right? And now it seems like God is speaking to the...
And you know what? In that 28, there is a thing amongst the firstborn male has to be bought back from God. We have that. So it is. Okay. You shall be holy people to me. You must not eat flesh torn by beasts in the field. You shall cast it to the dogs. You must not carry false rumors. You shall not join hands with the guilty to act as a malicious witness. You shall neither side with the mighty to do wrong. You shall not give perverse testimony in a dispute, so as to pervert it in favor of the mighty, nor shall you show deference to a person in a dispute. When you encounter your enemy's ox or ass wandering, you must take it back. When you see the ass of your enemy lying under its burden and would refrain from raising it, you must nevertheless help raise it. You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes. Keep far from a false charge. Do not bring death on those who are innocent and in the right, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt.
Now, can I just point out a couple of things here? As we turn the page, it was really interesting. See how they say, it's wow, it's amazing how they're trying to get to the point where there's no prejudice, right? Show no prejudice to the poor or to what they call the mighty, so that it's just looking at the act, you know? It's amazing that that's in there. I think that's really something, isn't it? All right. Anything? All right. So we were oppressed in the land of Egypt. Right. Okay. 6 years.
Do you like one?
Yeah. Yeah.
6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield. But in the seventh you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall cease from labor, in order that your ox and your ass may rest, and that your homeborn slave and the stranger may be refreshed. Be on guard concerning all that I have told you. Make no mention of the names of other gods. They shall not be heard on your lips. In some ways, there's a lot of humanitarian kindness here, you know.
Yeah. I mean, this is some of the Shemitah, right, Gary? This is the 6 years.
Six years, and then the.
I can't wait to go to that part, and then if we could bring that back, I'd love to bring this back. Work for 6 years, take the seventh off, and rest, and then we could read Torah all day long. This is great. I love it. And then you have the Sabbath, right? The Sabbath here in number 12. Seventh day. And what was amazing to me was when I think it was Rabbi Meyer who had a talk, was it this year? It was on Zoom, about how world-changing the whole idea of working 6 days, resting on the seventh. It just changed the society as a whole, because this is something that started here, went to the Christians. The Muslims do the same, right? I mean, it's just the world is put in this order, and to me it's like, wow, that's incredible.
Eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you, at the set time in the month of Aviv, for in it you went forth from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. And the feast of the harvest, of what you sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the results of 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the sovereign, the eternal.
Number 18, you shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, and the fat of my festal offering shall not be left lying until morning. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the eternal your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. I am sending an angel before you to guard you on the way, and to bring you to the place that I have made ready. Pay heed to him and obey him. Do not defy him, for he will not pardon your offenses, since my name is in him. But if you obey him and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I annihilate them, You shall not bow down to their gods in worship or follow their practices, but shall tear them down and smash their pillars to bits. You shall serve the eternal your God, who will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman in your land shall miscarry or be barren. I will let you enjoy the full count of your days. Whoa. I will send forth my terror before you, and I will throw into panic all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn tail before you. I will send a plague ahead of you, and it shall drive out before you the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply to your hurt. I will drive them out before you little by little until you have increased and possessed the land. I will set your borders from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not remain in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For you will serve their gods, and it will prove a snare to you. Wait a minute. Do you see what's happening here? For God's already saying you're going to serve their gods, right? That's bizarre, isn't it? And where does that happen? I'm reminded of Dr. Mike's nice video that he shared with us about the book of Judges, right after the book of Joshua. Once Joshua settles the Israelites in the land, all of a sudden Joshua dies, and then in Judges there were no kings in Israel. Everyone did what they wanted to do, and they ended up serving the gods of the Canaanites. That's according to that. Do you remember that, Gary? That was like, oh my God. And now we have it here. You will serve their gods. It's like, wow. Whew.
God knows human nature.
Yes, it's like, and I believe there was a rabbi who said that when God was talking to Adam and Eve, and he was saying, when you do eat from that tree, this is what's going to happen. Like, he already knows. Yeah, he knows human nature. When you eat from that tree, which you will do. It might not be today. It might not be tomorrow, but you will do it. All right. I'm sorry. I just I get a kick out of this. This is really great stuff. Does anyone want to pick up at number 20, chapter 24, 1? Yeah.
I can do it.
All right, Dr. Ed.
Then God said to Moses, come up to the Eternal with Aaron, Nabib, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel, and bow low from afar. Moses alone shall come near the Eternal, but the others shall not come near, nor shall the people come with him. Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of the Eternal and all the rules, and all the people answered with one voice, saying, all the things that the Eternal has commanded, we will do. Moses then wrote down all the commands of the Eternal. Early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He designated some assistants among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to the Eternal. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in the basins, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. Then he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people, and they said, all that the Eternal has spoken, we will faithfully do. Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant that the Eternal now makes with you concerning all these commands.
Wow.
That's heavy duty.
Yeah.
I agree. That's
you know what's so great that I think is that they all said in unison, we will faithfully do this. And they said again in another part, we'll do this. And I think that's pretty impressive, you know.
Yeah, I'm right with you. And of course the blood, splashing the blood, like, I mean, even just the thought of it is kind of shocking, but also to see it must have been shocking because, you know, the color of blood, that red, it hits you on a level that's very deep, right? It's like,
Yeah,
whoa,
but I
pay
think that they
attention.
were used to seeing blood. That's where I disagree. I don't think the blood was to us. It's much more dramatic, but to them, I don't think it was that dramatic because they're used to seeing blood of animals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was so dramatic. To me, it wouldn't have been dramatic because that's how it was in those days. They saw lots of blood of animals.
Right. And in the commentary below here, it says blood represented the essence of life. So
Right.
maybe it was a big symbol for.
Leviticus 2:21, for the blood is the life. How about that one?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Annie, do you want to pick it up at number 9 in the top?
Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the God of Israel, under whose feet was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Yes, God did raise a hand against the leaders of the Israelites. Then beheld God, and they ate and drank. The Eternal One said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments in which I have inscribed to instruct them." So Moses and his attendant Joshua arose, and Moses ascended the mountain of God. To the elders he said, "Wait here for us until we return to you. You have Aaron and Ur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them." When Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of the Eternal abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the 7th day, God called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now the presence of the Eternal appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Wow.
The end.
That's it for this week.
That's it for this week.
Wow. Well, it's been a delight as always. And I'm always interested in what people think. There's no question. It's a lot of fun. And so anyway, anything else going on this week? How's everybody doing?
You know what I wondered is I didn't see Myrna at the services.
Yeah, how is Myrna? Has anybody spoken to
her? I think she went to the Lappin thing tonight.
Pardon?
Oh, there's a Lappin. There's some type of
Zoom
is that Lappin.
Okay, maybe that's it. I also wanted to tell you, by the way, that I spoke to Ellie yesterday, and she was doing much better as of yesterday.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. I was worried about her
because for a while it was.
Yeah, because I spoke to her on Thursday, and I was not happy in what she was saying to me.
When I was living in Malden as a kid, 9 years old, we really didn't have any money. And I was in Mrs. O'Rourke's 4th grade class. I remember that. And she told me to write down some things that we would like to do in your life. And I made a list of the places I wanted to go in the world. And one of the places was I wanted to go to London, because I had spent the whole year studying the Rosetta Stone. Now, does everybody know what the Rosetta Stone is? Okay. And it's huge. It's a huge. And I was poor. We were poor. And I will tell you that my list of all the places in the world that I wanted to go, I've been to but one, and I'll get there.
That's awesome.
Anyway, I go to the London with my children, which was a big deal for me because I'd never been to London before. So the kids were very small. And I stepped in the British Museum, and there it was. The thing that made me do what I did for that whole 2 years, that gave me hope that I would never be poor my whole life. And there was in front of me, about 5 feet by 4 feet, was the Rosetta Stone behind a rope with 2 guards on each end. And I looked at that and I started to hyperventilate, even in front of my son. It's there. And I was back in 4th grade, and I stepped over the rope and touched it with my finger. Well, every alarm in the British Museum went off, and I realized what I
inventing the Tower
did,
of
and I
London.
jumped back and I ran away. So this finger touched the Rosetta Stone. Now,
Lucky you didn't end up in the Tower of London.
that's correct. You were right, which I've been to many times. And I'll tell you that story at some other point. Anyway, so the bottom line is my son, Jonathan, which I know that Gary knows, he's a vice president for Sanofi Genzyme Pharmaceuticals. He's a very successful kid who I didn't think he'd get out of middle school because he wouldn't do what they wanted him to do. He's just too smart, is what we ultimately figured. He said, I had a meeting in London, Dad, and I went to the British Museum, and guess what? The Rosetta Stone is now in glass.
Oh.
I said, you really? He said, yes. He says, but I put my nose up to the glass and I looked very carefully. It has a fingerprint. Now that's what he told me. It's not really true, but it
That's
caught me
great.
like,
It might be. You never know.
You never know.
It's like the
That's
astronauts'
That's
footprints
really
on the moon.
cool.
They're probably
Yeah.
still up there.
now
Right?
Cynthia mentioned something interesting. Put you in the Tower of London. So before I went to London, the first time, I decided I looked something up in a book and I read about it, and you can write the Queen and ask for, and to tell her you come into London and ask for an invitation to the ceremony of the keys, which is the nighttime lockup of the Tower of London. It's only opened by invitees from Her Majesty through the keeper of the keys, which is the commandant of the Tower of London. So I wrote her a letter, and I wrote a letter to the Queen. And the day I was leaving, I got a letter back from the Queen. Clearly, it wasn't from the Queen. It was some secretary with an invitation to the ceremony of the keys. And with my family, late at night, I, in the darkness with a half a dozen other people, were able to see. We were the only people inside the tower. We went to the Tower of London and we saw the ceremony of the keys. Who goes there? The keys. Whose keys? Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II keys. Then you can move forward. And we walked right in and they played the bugle and we walked out. And then we walked outside. There were thousands of people watching the ceremony outside the gates, trying to look in and see what was going on. But I was there by Her Majesty the Queen.
Wow. That's pretty
Wow.
impressive. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It is.